Do you have a paranormal encounter you'd like to share with us? Send us an email with your story for a chance of it being featured on Weird World. I lived in a haunted house for 4 years, and it was a living nightmare. I was raised in the south of Pennsylvania, quite close to Gettysburg. When I was 8 years old, my parents made the decision to build a house on a vacant plot of land that was surrounded by fields. It was truly stunning. I resided there with my mother and father, as well as my 2 older brothers, who were both 15 and 17 years old respectively at the time. Although I'd grown up in the area, we only occupied the house for 4 years. The first night staying there was nothing like I anticipated. I just closed my eyes and was lying on my bed when I heard a voice whispering, "Help!" right up against my face, repeating the word over and over again until I drifted off to sleep. After a month passes and I find myself on my bed, doing what I once loved most, reading, I saw something out of the corner of my eye and glanced up at my doorway. At that same moment, I see a full-blooded apparition of what seemed to be a soldier from the 1800s, although he seemed unable to see me. He just staggered past my room, very slowly. I remember his appearance vividly. Even after 20 years, he was drenched in blood, and it appeared as though he had either been shot or stabbed. This transpired over the course of approximately 5 seconds. Although I was tremendously terrified, my curiosity got the best of me, and I exited my room to search the rest of the house. However, I didn't find anything unusual. After a couple of weeks or so went by, I was trying to fall asleep in my bed, and before I even had an opportunity to close my eyes, I heard a deep, masculine voice. I couldn't comprehend anything that it was saying because it was speaking in a foreign language. However, its tone seemed irritated and angry. This recurred nightly for 2 weeks before abruptly ceasing. After that, I was afflicted by a night terror. I have an intense fear of spiders. I had awoken in the dead of night to find what appeared to be a tarantula crawling on top of me in bed. I'm positive it was there. I saw it with my own eyes. A sudden and intense feeling of fear came over me. My dad, who had been alerted, came into my room and checked on me, but nothing appeared to be wrong. However, before I could drift off to sleep, I could clearly hear the sound of what seemed to be 2 men chuckling right alongside my bed. By this point, I was becoming accustomed to these bizarre and terrifying occurrences. During one summer, every night, I would stay up late to watch Hannah Montana, which was on at midnight. On one of these nights, as I sat in my chair, I heard a noise downstairs that sounded like my door opening. Then I heard a woman's voice call out my name softly, as if she was looking for me. After the door closed and the footsteps sounded, there was a moment of silence. This same strange pattern of noises continued to occur every single night for nearly the next 2 months, without fail. However, I was so used to it by that point that it didn't even faze me. I was certain it wasn't my mother, because she would work 12 long nighttime shifts at the hospital nearly every night. No other females lived with us on the property. But one night, the strange occurrences came to a complete halt. It was past midnight, the usual time that this would occur, and nobody had called out to me. Afterwards, I went to bed and was finally able to rest with a sense of peace. And what must have been only a few hours of rest, I was suddenly awoken by a knock on my bedroom door. I checked the display on my cable box. The time was 3 a.m. I thought it was one of my 2 brothers and asked him to go away, but then I heard the doorknob starting to turn. However, it was locked and wasn't able to be opened. This was strange though, since I'd never slept with my bedroom door closed ever, and I most certainly did not lock it myself. The knocking and rattling of the doorknob continued for what seemed like an eternity. Then suddenly it ceased. Short time after, I heard a noise that resembled someone or something scratching at the door. I wondered to myself, what on earth is that? Could it be our cat? However, suddenly the scratching, knocking and turning of the knob all began to occur simultaneously. There was no way on earth that my cat could possibly knock, turn my doorknob, and scratch at the door all at once. Clearly. It lasted for around 30 seconds, and then it would suddenly stop. This occurred on at least 5 separate occasions. The knocking would sometimes be so forceful that it would sound like pounding, and my entire door would shake violently. Whoever or whatever it was on the outside of the door, it was desperate to come in. The noises soon escalated to the point that it woke my father. The ruckus had urged him to come to my room to check on me, but upon entering, everything immediately fell silent. He shouted my name, but I was too scared to respond. He returned to his room and shut the door, but the same scene played out a further 3 times. My father insisted I sleep in his room, and we never discussed the incident again. For a time, things appeared to be normal, until finally it struck again. My brother had gone up to use the bathroom. He switched on the light in the hallway and saw that my bedroom door was shut, as it was positioned opposite the bathroom down the hall. When he exited the bathroom, the hallway light had been switched off, and the hallway in darkness. My bedroom door was also now completely open. He peered into my room and saw me asleep, along with everyone else. He immediately went to wake up my father and brother and tell them what he'd seen. They did a full sweep of the house for signs of any kind of intruder, but nothing was out of the ordinary. A few months later, we were all jolted awake in the middle of the night by the blaring of our smoke detector. In a panic, we all rushed downstairs to discover that our kitchen stove was on the max temperature, with flames spewing from the top. This was in the complete dead of night. What in the world? We were all utterly baffled. On another occasion, I was alone at home with my father. My mother was working as usual, as was my oldest brother. My other brother was attending baseball practice. I was on the first floor when I heard what sounded like a rush of footsteps making their way up the stairs. Completely oblivious to the fact that neither one of my brothers was at home, I saw a figure quickly sprint through one of my brother's rooms before forcefully slamming the door, and I mean extremely forcefully. The slam was deafening. Naturally, I assumed it was my brother, but was curious to know what all the racket he was making was all about. However, when I opened the door, I found no one there. And then it happened. I watched the door slam right in front of me. After this, I continued to encounter these bizarre occurrences constantly. On another occasion, I saw my German shepherd hysterically sprint upstairs as if there was something she was chasing, but I couldn't see what it was. Whatever it had been, it seemed to now be under the bed, and she was growling viciously at it. I initially assumed it was my cat, but he was asleep perched atop the bed. When I looked under the bed, though, nothing was there. Another night, my cousin was staying over. We were moving through the living room when she spotted the reflection of a person in the glass of a large bookcase. She told me that on multiple occasions she'd witnessed a stranger staring at us through the window in my backyard. My brothers had virtually no friends that ever came over, so that wasn't a possible explanation. On another day, I walked down the stairs into the basement. When I reached the bottom of the stairs, yet again I witnessed another apparition. However, what was strange is that the apparition appeared to be the spitting image of my oldest brother. Yet at the same time, there was also something disturbingly non-human about its presentation. The best way to describe it, when I think about it now, is that it was like a real-life example of the uncanny valley. This is the unsettling feeling people get when they see something that almost looks human, but not quite, like a human animatronic head, for example. His skin was very pale, almost white, and his eyes a deep black. After it saw me, his eyes suddenly became enlarged, and a look of terror seemed to fill its face. Then it ran off and entered into the crawl space. I raced upstairs to discover that my brother hadn't even yet returned home. I never went down to the basement again after that. Several months later, I was spending time with my brother in the living room. We were watching George Lopez late in the evening. I was enjoying the show when suddenly he muted the television. He glanced at me inquisitively and uttered, "Did you hear that?" To which I replied, shaking my head, "No, I didn't hear a thing." We sat in silence for a moment, but then I heard it. We both listened as a patter of footsteps started coming up from the stairs from the basement. My brother quickly snatched up a baseball bat, and we went downstairs to investigate, but found nothing. Everyone else was asleep upstairs. My mother was awake until late the next night, occupied with something at the dining room table. Then suddenly at approximately 3 a.m, a shelf positioned on the dining room wall was forcibly propelled off of it and embedded itself in the wall next to it. We inspected the nails in the wall that had been holding up the shelf and found them to be completely straight. That was the final straw, and it helped that my mother was there to see it. We were finally going to move out. I was 12 years old at that point. I continued to experience strange paranormal events regularly, though nowhere near the level that we encountered in that house. Clearly there is some significant backstory as to why that land was so active with spirits, assuming that's in fact what any or all of them even were. And I'm very curious as to what that could have been. I've recently considered delving into the history of the land and maybe trying to hunt down some local records in the area. However, I now live in a different state. Also, another part of me just wants to leave the traumatic time in that house far, far behind me.